Dust chokes the air, a mix of cordite and pulverized adobe. From behind a crumbling hacienda wall, a handful of legionnaires in sweat-stained blue coats count their remaining cartridges. 1, maybe 2 per man. Outside, 2,000 Mexican soldiers ready another charge. This is not a defeat. This is the raw material of a myth. The French Foreign Legion's historical arc is not defined by clean victories, but by violent, often isolated stands where annihilation was the expected outcome. These battles forged a legend of suicidal discipline and tactical ferocity that still echoes in military academies. What transforms a mercenary unit into a brotherhood that charges into certain death? Today, 7 deadliest battles of the French Foreign Legion that defined the myth. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe so you make it all the way to the #1 spot. Now let's start the countdown. Battle of Kolwezi, May 1978. The Kafangisi Tigers of the FLNC, 3,000 to 4,000 strong, swept out of Angola and seized the mining city of Kolwezi in Zaire. They took nearly 3,000 Europeans hostage. Within days, between 90 and 280 were executed. President Mobutu's Zairean paratroopers had tried a counter-drop on the 15th and failed, which only accelerated the killings. The rebels then began pulling out in stolen vehicles, leaving a garrison of about 500 in the Manika quarter. The strategic logic was clear. Kolwezi sat on the rail lines linking Lubumbashi to Dilolo, and its mines produced cobalt, uranium, and copper. The Soviet Union had been quietly buying all the free market cobalt for months, a detail Western intelligence missed entirely. Mobutu's regime, seeing collapse, deliberately exaggerated the communist threat to guarantee a Western military response. He got it. France and Belgium launched parallel operations, Leopard and Red Bean, but refused to coordinate. The French wanted to neutralize the rebels and secure the city. The Belgians wanted only to evacuate civilians. This fractured command structure meant 2 separate chains of action, no unified tactical plan, and a serious risk of fratricide. The French 2nd Foreign Parachute Regiment, under Colonel Philippe Héroulin, flew 1,500 kilometers from Kinshasa and dropped 450 men onto the old hippodrome at 2:30 in the afternoon on the 19th. The jump altitude was just 250 meters. They descended under fire. 6 legionnaires were wounded before they hit the ground. 1 was isolated, killed, and mutilated in the street while still tangled in his harness. The drop zone was not secure. The intelligence had failed to pinpoint rebel firing positions. Yet the Legion's speed of violence was immediate. Snipers with FRF-1 rifles began dropping rebels at 300 meters. When 3 captured Panhard AML armored cars counterattacked, Legionnaires knocked out the lead vehicle at 50 meters with an LRA-CF-1 rocket. The city was under French control by 6 in the evening. A second wave of 250 paratroopers dropped east of the city at dawn on the 20th, taking rebel positions from behind. They entered the P2 quarter and found the evidence of mass executions. The Belgian paracommandos, meanwhile, landed at the airport and marched into the city on foot. French legionnaires opened fire on them. A brief firefight erupted before the units identified each other. No one was killed, but the incident exposed the operational chaos born of divided command. The Belgians evacuated 2,000 Europeans by noon. The Legion secured the city and killed about 400 FLNC fighters, capturing 1,500 weapons. The operation rescued over 2,800 civilians in 2 days. But the intelligence failure was absolute. The rebels' strength, their positions, and the very location of the hostages were all learned on the ground, under fire, by legionnaires paying in blood. Battle of Narvik, April 9th, 1940. The German destroyer Wilhelm Heidkamp slid through fog and heavy snow into Ofot Fjord, carrying 200 mountain troops. The target was the ice-free port-shipping Swedish iron ore to the Third Reich. The old Norwegian coastal defense ship Eidsvold stood in the way. At 700 meters, the German commander sent an officer to demand surrender. Captain Odd Ezekson Willoch refused. He shouted to his crew to man the guns. The Germans fired 4 torpedoes. 2 hit before the Norwegian 15-centimeter guns could fire a single shot. The ammunition magazine ignited. Eidsvold blew in half and sank in seconds, propellers still turning. 175 sailors died in freezing water. 8 survived. Minutes later, sister ship Nor opened fire with 21-centimeter guns at 800 meters. Difficult weather scattered the salvos. The German destroyer Bernd von Arnim answered with 3 torpedo salvos. The last struck midships. Norge sank in under 1 minute. 101 crew perished. The naval battle lasted less than 20 minutes. Ashore, the garrison commander, Colonel Conrad Sundlow, surrendered Narvik without a fight. He was later charged with treason, though convicted only of negligence. The port fell, but the land battle was just beginning. By May 28th, the 13th Demi-Brigade of the Foreign Legion, alongside Norwegian and Polish troops, stormed the mountains surrounding Narvik. They retook the town in the first major Allied land victory of the war. The strategic logic was sound: seize the ore supply, deny it to Germany, but the operational logic had already collapsed. France was falling. On June 8th, just days after victory, the Allies evacuated Norway completely. The port, the ore, the frozen graves of Eidsvoll and Norge all left to the Germans. A battle won, a campaign lost, because a front 1,000 miles away dictated the strategy. Battle of Camerone, April 30th, 1863. The French Foreign Legion's 3rd Company was on the road in Veracruz, Mexico. 62 legionnaires and 3 officers, led by Captain Jean d'Anjou. Their mission was to escort a supply convoy carrying 3 million francs in gold, siege guns, and ammunition wagons. They never reached it. At 7 in the morning, they stopped at Palo Verde to boil coffee. By 8, Mexican cavalry appeared on the horizon. D'Anjou ordered his men back to a defensible position, a ruined hacienda with 10-foot walls near the village of Camerone. The coffee was left behind. What followed was a tactical defeat that became the Legion's spiritual cornerstone. The Mexican force numbered around 2,000 men, cavalry and infantry from Colonel Francisco de Paula Milan's Center Brigade. D'Anjou's 65 were outnumbered 30-1. The tactical problem was simple. The legionnaires had to hold the hacienda long enough to draw Mexican attention away from the convoy. D'Anjou understood this meant a last stand. He made his men swear an oath on his wooden prosthetic hand to fight to the death rather than surrender. Then he shared his bottle of wine. The first Mexican charge came at 11 in the morning. D'Anjou was shot in the chest and died within minutes. Lieutenant Villain took command. The hacienda had no water, no food. The mules carrying supplies had bolted during the initial cavalry encounter. Thirst and heat stroke became as dangerous as bullets. By 2 in the afternoon, Villain was dead. Lieutenant Maudet assumed command with only 20 men still able to fight. The ranch house roof burned away. By 5:12, legionnaires remained. Ammunition ran out at 6 in the evening. Maudet led the last 5 men in a bayonet charge. 2 fell immediately. Corporal Maine, one of 3 survivors, negotiated their surrender on the condition they kept their weapons and their wounded lieutenant received care. Mexican Colonel Milan, seeing only 3 men left standing, said they were not men but demons. Over 800 Mexican casualties lay on the field. The convoy got through untouched. Lieutenant Maudet died of his wounds 8 days later. Captain d'Anjou's wooden hand was recovered and became the Legion's most venerated relic. Every April 30th, the Legion parades that hand at its headquarters in Aubagne. Celilo, Battle of Bir Hakeim. Late May, 1942. The Ghazala line in Libya is a string of fortified boxes stretching 50 miles into the desert. The southernmost box is an old Ottoman fort called Bir Hakeim, held by the 1st Free French Brigade under General Marie-Pierre Koenig. 3,700 men, including the 13th Demi-Brigade of the Foreign Legion, dug in behind 50,000 mines. Rommel's plan, Operation Venice, is a sweeping flanking maneuver. The Italian Ariete Armored Division will pin the Free French while the 15th and 21st Panzer Divisions loop south, then strike east and north to encircle the British 8th Army. The attack begins on May 26th. The Ariete Division assaults Bir Hakeim, expecting a quick neutralization. They are stopped cold by precise 75mm gunfire and dense minefields. The box does not fall. Rommel's panzers race east, but their supply lines are now exposed. Every truck carrying fuel and ammunition must funnel through a narrow gap north of Bir Hakeim, within range of the French guns. Koenig's men are not just defending. They are a dagger pointed at the artery of the entire Africa Corps. Rommel diverts the 90th Light Division to crush the position. Stuka dive bombers pound the pentagon-shaped fort daily. The perimeter shrinks. Water runs to less than a pint per man per day. On June 1st, the Germans send a demand for surrender. Koenig refuses. The siege becomes a battle of attrition, a contest of will against a mechanized army. The legionnaires and Free French hold for 16 days, buying time the 8th Army desperately needs to pull back and avoid complete destruction. On the night of June 10th, with ammunition exhausted and no hope of relief, Koenig orders a breakout. In brutal hand-to-hand fighting, 2/3 of the garrison pierces the German lines and escapes into the darkness. The stand at Bir Hakeim delayed Rommel's advance by a critical margin, forcing him to consume fuel and armor he could not replace. The delay directly contributed to the cancellation of the Axis invasion of Malta and gave the British time to fortify the Alamein line. The battle forged the myth of the Free French as a fighting force, a fact Winston Churchill used to rename them the Fighting French. The defense was a strategic success born from tactical discipline. A static strongpoint, correctly sited, disrupted the entire logic of a mobile armored offensive. Battle of Dien Bien Phu. The valley is in northwest Vietnam, near the Laotian border. The date is March 13, 1954. The French High Command had parachuted the 13th Demi-Brigade of the Foreign Legion into a remote basin, along with other French Union forces. The mission was to build a fortified air-land base, a hedgehog deep in enemy territory. The strategic logic was to cut Viet Minh's supply lines into Laos and lure General Giap into a set-piece battle where superior French firepower would destroy him. The tactical reality was a death trap. The French commander, Colonel de Castries, placed his artillery in open pits on the valley floor. The infantry strongpoints, given women's names like Beatrice and Gabrielle, were dug into the low hills. The fatal flaw was a catastrophic failure of terrain analysis. The French believed the steep, jungle-covered mountains surrounding the basin were impassable to heavy artillery. They were wrong. General Giap, commanding the Viet Minh, did not accept the terrain's limitations. He mobilized tens of thousands of porters and engineers. They dismantled 100 5mm howitzers and anti-aircraft guns piece by piece. They dragged them by hand up the reverse slopes, through tunnels carved into the rock. The guns were positioned in camouflaged casemates on the forward slopes, looking down into the bowl. The French were in the bottom of a rice bowl, with the enemy on the rim. The physics of the kill zone was simple. The Viet Minh had direct line of sight and plunging fire. Every French artillery piece, every airstrip, every bunker was pre-registered. When the barrage began, the French counter-battery fire was useless. Their shells could not penetrate the rock casemates or loop over the crest. The airstrip, the camp's sole lifeline, was destroyed in the first hours. The siege lasted 56 days. The legionnaires of the 13th Demi-Brigade fought from flooded trenches with no reinforcements, dwindling ammunition, and a perimeter shrinking by the hour. The air resupply drops fell into enemy hands. The final assault came on May 7th. The garrison was overrun. Out of a garrison of nearly 15,000 men, over 2,000 were killed. The rest marched into captivity. The defeat did not just end a battle. It broke the political will of France and led directly to the Geneva Accords, ending the First Indochina War. Battle of the Ourcq, September 5th, 1914. The Great Retreat was over. The German First Army, under von Kluck, had wheeled east of Paris, exposing its right flank to a garrison commanded by General Gallieni. Gallieni saw the opening. He requisitioned Parisian taxicabs to shuttle soldiers to the front, but his main striking force was the Sixth Army. Embedded within it was a single regiment of the Foreign Legion, the Régiment de Marche de la Légion étrangère. Their objective, the heights near the village of Barcy, along the Ourcq River. The Germans were dug in on a fortified ridgeline with clear fields of fire. The Legion's advance began at dawn across a kilometer of open sugar beet fields. German machine guns opened up immediately. The Legionnaires had no artillery support. Their only option was a direct frontal assault. The tactical problem was simple physics. A mass of men moving at running speed against a static protected firing line with interlocking sectors of fire. The regiment's commander, Colonel Cott, ordered a bayonet charge. The first wave was cut down. The second wave stepped over the bodies and kept moving. Casualties hit 50%. Officers were killed at the head of their columns. The Legionnaires closed the distance and broke into the German trenches at the point of a bayonet. The shock collapsed the German flank. Von Kluck was forced to pull his corps back, opening a 30-kilometer gap between the German First and Second Armies. The British Expeditionary Force marched into that gap. The Schlieffen Plan shattered. The Legion's March Regiment ceased to exist as a fighting unit, with over half its strength lost in a single morning, but Paris was saved. Battle of Thuyen Quang. The siege began in earnest on the 24th of November, 1884, in the dense malarial hills of northern Tonkin. A French garrison of 619 men, including 2 companies of the Foreign Legion, occupied an isolated masonry citadel on the Clear River. Facing them were 12,000 soldiers of China's Yunnan Army and the Black Flag Army. The post was 80 kilometers from the nearest French support. Its commander, Major Marc-Edmond Domenech, had a simple problem. The citadel was overlooked by wooded hills. Chinese snipers could fire directly down into the compound. Domenech could not stop the plunging fire, but he could delay a mass assault. He built a blockhouse on a hill 300 meters south of the perimeter and a fortified pagoda position called Little Gibraltar on the riverbank. These outworks forced the Chinese to spend their strength seizing them before they could close in on the main walls. The logic was to trade space for time. The Chinese commander, Tang Jingsong, understood this geometry. He did not simply throw his 9,000 Yunnan regulars and 3,000 black flags at the walls. He ordered his troops to dig. Over 1,000 laborers began driving approach saps toward the French positions from the southwest and north. The goal was to get under the walls and blow them with mines. By late January, the Chinese trenches were less than 1,000 meters from the perimeter. The blockhouse had to be abandoned. Its guns turned against the French. The siege became an underground war. The Chinese sapped relentlessly toward the wall. Sergeant Jules Bobillot, a French engineer, dug counter-galleries to intercept them. On the 11th of February, a pickaxe broke through the thin dirt wall, separating a French and Chinese miner. A revolver fight erupted in the pitch-black tunnel. The next evening, the first Chinese mine detonated beneath the southwest wall. The counter-galleries weakened the blast, and a follow-up assault was repelled with heavy losses. A second mine on the 13th of February tore a 15-meter breach in the wall. The Chinese charged through the gap. The legionnaires met them with bayonets and sealed the breach. The garrison was now living under constant artillery and rifle fire. Legion marksmen in the watchtowers killed an estimated 700 Chinese laborers and soldiers. To slow the digging, movement inside the citadel became a lethal gamble. The relief column under Lieutenant Colonel Giovanni Nelli would not break through the blocking position at Ourcq until the 3rd of March. When the column arrived, the garrison was decimated by shrapnel and disease, but the fortress had not fallen. The defense of Tuyenquang became a foundational myth of the legions, not because of a grand victory, but because of a calculated subterranean endurance against a 10-to-1 siege. The legion's myth was not built on victories alone, but on the deliberate calculus of fighting where the cost in foreign blood was politically acceptable. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Drop your idea for the next episode in the comments.